Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of A Smarter Way to Retire, the podcast where we break down the steps to building a confident retirement plan. I'm Tony Leonardi, your CFP professional here in Connecticut, and I'm thrilled to be with you today. As we head into summer, I've been reflecting on how health and fitness play a critical role in enjoying a long and fulfilling retirement. I'm excited to have a guest with us today, Philip Pape. Philip is a certified nutrition coach and the host of Wits and Weights. It's a top 25 podcast or a top 1% podcast on the nutrition charts. It's a podcast for people who want to build muscle, lose fat, transform their health with evidence-based strategies. And I love that because that reminds me of financial planning. Evidence-based, common sense-based, numbers-based. I love that. Through his coaching and his podcast, Philip helps busy professionals cut through the confusion around food and fitness so they can finally look, feel, and perform their best, especially in their fees and beyond. Another thing that I love about Philip's bio, that fees and beyond. As a financial planner, obviously I work in that age group, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, all the way through 80s and 90s and even beyond that. So I think we work with the same types of people. So Philip, thanks for joining me today. I'm really glad you're here because I've seen firsthand how health and wealth are deeply connected. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your podcast?
Yeah, Tony, it's funny. You were talking about financials, investment. I used to be very much into, trading stocks as a young guy and trying to game the system, right? And I'm sure you talk all about how we generally can't do that. Mm-hmm. And I think fitness is kind of similar. There's a lot of parallels between health and wealth. I think you and I were talking about that earlier, that you plan for this 30-year retirement, this 40-year retirement, but you neglect the most important vehicle to enjoy it, which is actually your body, right? Not necessarily the financial assets, because what are they worth? Yeah. And my goal is to help people get stronger, to stay energized, but it's because I have a lot of personal stake in it when I look around at my own family, my own history, and my own journey, being a guy in my 40s and thinking ahead to these things. So quick background for me, you talked about evidence. I'm an engineer by background, and I think in terms of systems and feedback loops and data, but I also understand there's a human element to all of this. There's a psychology where a lot of people struggle and fail with their fitness due to not knowing what to do. That's part of the problem, but also being able to get quote unquote motivated or stick to it or, put in the reps for the long haul. Right. So I would say about 5 years ago, you and I have known each other actually quite a while. We first met a long time ago in the CrossFit world.
Right.
And I used to be in CrossFit for probably 8-9 years. And then I sort of switched to more of strength training focus, lifting, progression, things like that around the pandemic. There's a whole backstory to how I got into it, but the long story short is I had a lot of time on my hands working from home that year, whereas a lot of people tended to regress in their fitness. I took it as an opportunity to learn a ton through podcasts, books, and videos and such. And so I came across this whole world that we call evidence-based fitness. It's a very loaded term. We can get into what that means, but it's effectively saying, what does the science say about our ability to change our physique, to change our health, to eat in a way that's nutritious, however, not restrictive, and that it's sustainable, and that we can do it for the long haul, just like when you use dollar cost averaging in an investment account and want to just, it's boring, but it's sustainable and it's going to last for a long time. And that's kind of the philosophy behind what I do. So we could dig into details. That's the background.
No, I love that because I see the similarities in our two worlds. You're in the fitness world, nutrition world. You can see a lot of folks who use maybe gimmicks or tricks or tips, not really evidence-based. Same thing happens in the financial world. People are always looking for hunches or gimmicks of some sort, and I'm really evidence-based as well. I like to work on a plan based on the numbers and based on, like you said, the engineering and using common sense. And you talk about CrossFit. I actually felt like my health journey started taking off in my fees and beyond. I've been a financial planner for over 30 years, and I spent decades commuting an hour back and forth to an office, then spending the day sitting at my desk, looking at a computer, doing financial plans. And when I got into my fees, I felt like, this is it for me as an athlete physically. My body's starting to change. I'm starting to get a pot belly. I'm not competing in sports anymore. I wasn't really sure of what I was doing in the gym. And physically, I just felt like that was it for me. And then, like you mentioned, CrossFit, I found that around age 40. And that's when things really took a turn for me, because I really started to focus more on, not on working out, but on working on my fitness and my health. And that really was the difference for me.
Yeah, no, 100%. Everything you're saying regarding the long-term planning and the consistency, I think about like the compounding returns you get just from from having a system where you're not really, you mentioned quick fixes, right? A lot of the industry is built on fear and marketing over, especially weight loss is the big trigger word for a lot of people. Today it's, menopause, weight loss resistance. You'll hear all these trigger terms that people use. Right. Guys who had it easy in their 20s, right? Could eat whatever they want, roaring metabolism, which I wasn't that. So at least I didn't have that kind of false experience to fall back on, thinking that this is how it always is going to work. But I definitely know a lot of men, for example, who have lifted for many years and then, get the pot belly, right? Or maybe they drink too much alcohol, or they just don't know how to control their diet. And so they say, well, I just went on carnivore, I went on keto, or I did this Weight Watchers, or now I'm in GLP-1s, or whatever it is. And it's not with a long-term thinking.
Looking
involved.
for the quick fix. Yeah. Looking for the fad.
Yeah. So, then it raises the question, well, then what is important? Because you mentioned CrossFit. People are like, well, is that what I should do? And then I talk about strength training. Is that what I should do? And I think it's more about the principles than the methods, even though there are more efficient methods than others, right?
Sure.
And I always start with the principle of, what are we doing this for? Like, why do you sock away money every month from the time you're 20, or you should be, right? And you make that short-term sacrifice or that short-term trade-off, but in the long term, it's going to pay off. It's the longevity of it. Knowing that you're going to live to your 90s. I want to live till I'm 95 and I die of a deadlift is what I joke about all the time. Like, I die doing a deadlift rather than, say Alzheimer's or cancer or 30 years of some form of suffering in a medical state of frailty and decline, which hits really home with a lot of people listening, I imagine. And, you're talking to the retirement community or people that are planning to retire. I speak to people at all different ages. It's never too late to start. I know bodybuilders in their 80s who started when they were 79. You can always build muscle. You can always get strong. The question is, do you want to? Are you going to do it? And are you going to kind of eschew is the word, I guess, or reject the mythology of aging that we've all bought into, that it's frailty, it's decline, it's polypharmacy, it's medication, it's nursing homes. It doesn't have to be any of those things if you start to invest today, whatever today is for you.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest barrier for people in their retirement years is they have this sense that, well, I'm too old for this. If I haven't, been a person who goes to the gym regularly, and now that I'm in my 60s or my 70s, well, that's my time has passed. I'm too old. I can't lift weights. I'm too old for that. My joints can't take it. My bones may be too frail. That's a young person's game. So how do you help people get past that barrier of I'm too old to do these types of things?
Yeah, two things come to mind. One is education and the other is practice, right? So on the education side, it really is like my podcast and really trying to immerse yourself in what do we really know? Because I think if you read the newspaper or I don't know what magazines are still out today, People Magazine or whatever, just like some random magazine, or if you live in the villages, my parents live in the villages, you read the Village Sun or whatever it's called. They're going to have these little fluff pieces about walking and movement and yoga and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't, I think the world is changing. I think we're getting more educated about it, but I think there's not a lot of understanding that putting load on your spine, like lifting weights, against resistance in some way, whether that's with your body, with bands, with dumbbells, with barbells, is a very human thing to do. And it's a very natural way to expand your lifespan, reduce diseases of aging, help with things like body fat, which we could talk about diet because that's also very important, but also help you get off the toilet and help you play with your grandkids and help you like carry the groceries and not depend on people. Man, when I see Tony, I see this all the time, like in my client community. In fact, I just had an episode come out with Beth. She's 68. She lifts weights. She's building muscle now and gaining weight to build muscle. Crazy, right?
I just listened to that episode. It was fantastic. Okay. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Right. And she's talking about how there are these stereotypes, right? She offered to carry this big case of water, and someone said, no, don't do that. You're going to hurt yourself, or let the young guy over there help you with it.
Sure.
She's like, nah, I could do it. I'm fine. And no, you're going to hurt your back. So there are a lot of misconceptions. And I think it starts with education, but then it also combined with practice. So if I said, look, could you get off the couch right now? And the answer is no. Well, maybe you could get off a very high stool, right? At some function, you're going to say, yes, I can do that. And that's the level of function you start. And then you can start to put in the reps and build strength from there. My own mom confided in me that she was having trouble getting off the couch. And I had her do chair squats. And after like 2 days, she said, well, I was sore the first day. And then by the second day, some of my pain started to go away and I felt stronger. I said, that's the power of moving your body.
After 2 days, that's amazing.
After 2 days, after 3 days. And then she got excited about it. She's like, well, what do I do next? I said, well, now we have to get you squatting with your body.
Right.
And then after that, she said, you know what? I just signed up for a gym membership. What do I do at the gym to keep progressing and making it harder on my body so I can grow? So once you do that and kind of prove to yourself that it's possible, that's where the floodgates open and the excitement opens. It's just taking that first step. And besides lifting weights, we can get into strength and muscle and all that. There's just having a generally healthy lifestyle, with your movement, with your activity, and with your food as well. It kind of all comes together.
What just struck me about what you said there is the importance of having a good coach. Because I think a lot of times, people at any age will jump into some type of gym program that hasn't been designed for them, right? And the next day they can't walk, right? Because they didn't ease their way into it. And then they quit because they say, well, this is not for me. So what you mentioned there was taking your mom through that progression of just starting easy, based on what she was capable of doing and going from there. So I think that's really important. If you're a client of mine, you have a wealth coach, so to speak, right? How many people out there have a health coach?
That is a great point. As you were saying that came to mind is how many people, they need an accountant or certified financial planner or financial counselor, right?
Right.
It's almost a necessity. And yet are not willing to spend even $100 a month on something that's going to allow them to live 30 years long or the longer health span. It is quite baffling.
Especially as you get older. And when you're younger, you can jump into the gym and you can start lifting weights and you can squat heavy with your friends and everything will be fine. But if you're in your 60s or 70s or 80s and want to start, you really should start with a coach like Philip, who has experience working with older people, and ease your way into it. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, and I suppose everyone listening has a different argument that's going to resonate with them, right? Like we can talk about the financial argument that your healthcare costs are going to be significantly lower if you're healthier. I think there was a statistic that's like $2,500 a year is saved by physically active adults versus non-physically active. Now, of course, if you've got healthcare insurance or Medicare or whatever, and it's paying for it, you're kind of not seeing those costs, perhaps. I would then lean into all the other much worse costs of having poor health. The biggest one being sarcopenia, which is the decline in your muscle mass over time. It starts in our 30s, and that is what leads to the older lady having a simple fall in the parking lot, breaking her hip, and leading to pneumonia in the hospital or being on 2 or 3 or 4 medications, going on opioids. Like there's always this cascade of events that leads to, we know it. We've all seen it. We've seen it. We've seen people in nursing homes, they get in, they never come out. Even if we see they could improve their mobility and health, and it doesn't happen. And I don't like to paint such a dire picture, but I like to reframe it and say, you know what? You have control over that if you start now and focus on what's called the sick aging phenotype, which is the idea that there's you either age into sickness or you age into health. And we want to age into health. That's kind of what what I'm getting at with that.
And other than the psychological barrier of people saying, well, I'm too old for this. This is a young person's game. Are there resources available out there for the retired community? If you go to the typical Globo gym, the box gym, are there coaches available who specialize in working with, let's say, retired people? Or are they more focused on the younger clientele?
I mean, speaking for the average personal trainer, they won't decline anybody as a client, I'm sure.
Right.
But there are coaches out there who are really good working with older folks. I know Starting Strength is a well-known company out there that's expanding gyms across the country. And they're what I would call a true lifting gym that really caters to everybody, especially older folks. where you're going to pay a lot more than a regular gym, right? See, this is the thing. You got to look at the investment.
Right.
If you're paying $20 a month for a big purple box gym, you're not going to get any personal training. Then when you add in the personal training, you're going to get some 23-year-old who's like, number one, a marketer, and then number two, maybe a personal trainer. So you've got to shop around. You've got to talk to folks like me who do it online. It's a different model. It's a model where you seek out the education and the support. You get some sort of program suggested to you. Like I will suggest a program. I do it for free every day to people in our Facebook group and through email. I don't care, in my podcast. And then you start to follow it. The question is, what kind of support do you need to have the right form and technique to avoid injury, to progress properly? But let me tell you, it doesn't take a lot of coaching to get from complete beginner to good enough to make this work for you. And then it's just a question of how much more you want to take it from there. And if you're kind of clumsy athletically, for example, you probably need a little more coaching than someone who's a little more has aptitude for it. Yeah. So yeah, the answer is yes, that there's no excuse. They're out there. Reach out to me. Check out my show. Reach out. Join our Facebook group. You're going to see a bunch of other lifters in their 50s, 60s, 70s who are doing the same thing.
It's probably a strange concept for a lot of people to think, how do I get an online fitness coach? Shouldn't the fitness coach be there with me? Well, I'm used to this. I know online programming has been in my world for a long time. But maybe talk about how an online coach works versus a physical coach right there next to you.
Yeah, I mean, from a personal training perspective. So just to clarify, the vast majority of what I do is like nutrition and lifestyle coaching. But I provide what I would call the services of a good personal trainer in terms of what's valuable from what they do. What I mean by that is a lot of personal trainers, they write you a program and that they think that's their job. That the job isn't to write you. Let me tell you, you can get a template online. I can give you a template right now that's perfectly effective for the next 3 years. Okay. I give it to you in 5 seconds. The question is how you implement it and how you do the exercises. So an online trainer, the way it would work is you'd go to day one to the gym. You'd have your program written out, right? You'd have your exercises, the number of sets, the number of reps, maybe even the weight, right? That might be up to you. That might be written out for you. And then the most effective way to get online coaching is to take video of you doing the lift, upload it to your coach. And what I do is I do a screen share where I video myself breaking it down and telling you, here's the cues we need. Here's your depth on the squat. Here's what I see with your foot stance. Here's a thing you could do with your grip. And by the way, here's a video showing you how to do it. Like that would be a good coach. There are communities that do that as well, that do like what they call form checks. That's how it works. Yeah.
So you're talking a lot about a lot of barbell work, which I think is probably another strange concept for people in their retirement years. If you've been going to the gym for several decades, you're probably used to using machines, walking on a treadmill, walking on a stair climber, maybe doing some flies on a machine. But I think you're primarily interested in helping people move a barbell, moving free weights. Am I making a good assumption there?
It's a good assumption. And then we get back to principles versus methods, because to me, a barbell is a tool. It's a method, and it's a very efficient, safe, okay? And safe is a key word, especially when you're older and you're worried about injury. It's a very safe, easily trainable, and progressible tool. And people are like, well, they think of powerlifters and they think of Olympic athletes. They think of CrossFit. Think about a barbell. It is a bar that's symmetrical, and you can use safety equipment like a rack and spotter arms, what they're called, or pins or whatever. And you can very safely exercise with a barbell, where even if you fail to get a rep, you're able to set it down gently, not like in CrossFit where they throw it down, but gently. Because I have a home gym. I'm not throwing anything on my floor in the home gym. And you can progress it very incrementally. So meaning somebody who's 75 who's never lifted before, I would ask them to use a dowel or a broom handle as their bar, if they're like have zero strength at all. Now, a lot of people I deal with have some strength, maybe they're in their 50s or 60s, and we'll start with an empty bar, which is 45 pounds, or a women's bar, which is like 35, or a 15-pound bar, right? Sure. And then guess what you can do? You could add two little plates of 1 pound each if you had to, and incrementally go up. And that's what I mean. So it's very safe. It's very trainable. And here's the thing: back pain, joint pain, some of the biggest complaints among the older population. I'm not going to guarantee it because we don't make statements like that on this podcast, and there's a big disclaimer at the end. But but a huge majority of people that I've worked with that had back pain, my recommendation is to deadlift. And it sounds counterintuitive, but you start deadlifting, what happens is you start using all those muscles in your back that support your spine, and your body adapts to that, and then you actually have less pain. right? Same thing with knee pain. You start squatting, knee pain goes away. Elbow pain goes away from benching. Now, you could definitely introduce injury and pain if you do things the wrong way, too fast, try to lift too heavy. Obviously, we know in CrossFit, there's risk because of speed and trying to hit like these records and everything. But that's a function of the process of the method and not the tool. The tool. So the long answer to your question is, if somebody has access to a barbell or dumbbells, I prefer starting there. If not, I would start with body weight, machines, or even bands.
It's funny that you're talking about back pain and deadlifting, because my weakness has always been my back. I've always had back issues going back to when I was in my 30s. As I mentioned, I was commuting an hour plus each direction, sitting at a desk in my office, going to the gym at night, not really understanding what I was doing. And I had a lot of back pain. It was probably lack of range of motion, lack of mobility, just from sitting all day. Yes. So I avoided doing deadlifts and working on my back because I had back pain. So I think what saved me was not only learning how to deadlift better, but working on my mobility. So a goal for me is 5 days a week of mobility work, 20 minutes a day. And that has been fantastic for me in terms of relieving back pain. Do you focus on mobility as well?
Not as much, believe it or not, not as much.
Okay.
It's a very individualized case-by-case thing. Some people will absolutely need additional mobility work because of past injuries or chronic weakness from just decades, right? You're in your 70s and your shoulder joint just doesn't have the range of motion, right? Or your hip joint doesn't have the range of motion, or you had some sort of, knee replacement, all those things. So it's kind of very personalized, and sometimes the mobility comes from strength. Right. So just getting stronger actually improves your mobility. So a lot of times people say, I don't have the ankle mobility for squats. I don't have the depth for squats. I'm like, let's start sitting to a box wearing squat shoes and see if you can't do that. Vast majority of people are like, oh yeah, I can do that. Then you can squat. And now it's a matter of loading from there. And by the way, your ankle mobility, your knee and hip mobility will start to open up as you develop that musculature. And if it doesn't, then we have alternative things to do. For example, shoulder mobility is a big problem for a lot of folks, myself included. I had rotator cuff surgery from an old injury, not having to do with lifting. And for me, it's very hard to get in because of the external rotation under a low bar back squat. So I either just avoid it and I do safety squats, which that's what you can do, is you could use different movements, or I will spend like a good 5 minutes stretching into the bar with that exact position I need to be in. And the body's really good about like warming up into that. So I'm not against mobility. I like lacrosse balls. I like massage. I like all that stuff. But I also don't want people to use that as an excuse to not start today lifting weights. That's the other side of it, is you and I were kind of like in the fitness lifestyle. A lot of people listening don't do anything. And I'm like, let's start somewhere. And that somewhere might be walking. It might not even be go to the gym.
Sure.
Like you talked about back pain. I have a desk job as well. So I have like 2 standing desks. I have a treadmill, and I try to not be sitting most of the day is the way I put it, because sitting and not sitting, general movement and not sitting are 2 independent risk factors for mortality. What I mean by that is we need to move, we need to walk, we need to get a good amount of steps in. That's an important part of being a human being, but also we need to not sit for long stretches. It's an independent risk factor for lots of issues, and it has to do with blood flow and some other factors related to inflammation, right? There's a lot of inflammation's a hot topic, Tony, right? Because there's a lot of misinformation about inflammatory foods and all this stuff out there, and as you know, but for a lot, it's a whole other podcast, but in my world, most people, they're inflamed because they're not moving, because they are sitting all day, because they don't lift weights. And that is a massive trigger for inflammation in your body when you're not using it the way it's supposed to be used as a human. And we can get into so many other health related benefits of all of this with insulin sensitivity and utilization of carbs and bone health, hormones. I mean, the list just goes on.
All right. So I think for the average person, especially someone who's in their retirement years, and they think about exercise, they think about doing cardio and trying to lose weight and stay skinny. Would that be your definition of what fitness is today? And if not, how would you change that definition?
That's a good question. The way you asked it threw me off. Would that be my definition of fitness? No, absolutely not. No, I mean, what is fitness? Fitness is the ability to basically move through space actively and with freedom. I mean, that's like one definition of it, right? It's just to be able to use your human body. There's different definitions, CrossFit. I remember when I took CrossFit, they talked about the different areas of fitness, right? The different specialties. I forget what the term was. Strength is just one of those. I would say, though, that strength is the foundation of all other aspects of fitness. If you just look at force production, you look at any sport, any form of movement, pickleball, doesn't matter. BJJ, it doesn't matter. Having a higher base of strength is going to elevate every other form of movement, including endurance, including biking, running, and all of those things, as well as reduce injury and so on. So to me, fitness is, are you strong enough to avoid injury and have a long life doing what you do and what you love? So if you want to play pickleball, if you want to bike, are you constantly getting injured and joint pain and shin splints doing it? Because to me, then you're not fit, right?
Right.
So I think they put the cart before the horse. I think losing weight is its own hot topic. I talk a lot about fat loss and body composition and not weight loss, because so many people have tried to diet their whole lives, are undernourished, underfed, underenergized, and they're probably weak as a result and haven't been able to build muscle or strength. Conversely, those who fuel their bodies, right? Enough protein, enough calories, enough carbs, yes, and use that to have an active, fit lifestyle, like you talked about, fitness, are going to be much better off in the long run than people who just run all the time.
So if you say the foundation of fitness is strength, and the cardio on top of that to keep the heart moving, to keep your vascular system healthy, or is it primarily strength training is what you're focusing on?
No. If I were to layer a pyramid of movement, I would start with strength training. That's like a non-negotiable. I would layer walking on top of that. So anywhere from a minimum of 7,000 to 9,000 steps is what the literature shows us is a step change between risk factors and a healthier lifestyle. And then the next level would be fun movement, I would call it, like things you enjoy, And finally, if you're trying to strategically add in cardio, I would add in things like sprinting, something anabolic or something very kind of like HIIT, but there's different modes of HIIT, some that I think are more effective than others. At the end of the day, walking alone is going to get you up into a cardio regime that is healthy enough to have a very long, perfectly healthy life. Like we know from the science, you don't even have to do any other forms of cardio besides, decent amount of walking and brisk walking and not sitting, right? But if you want to step it up a little bit, if you care about your VO2 max, if you care about being a little faster, more fit in that way, you can definitely do cardio, but have fun. Like, I don't want you to be running chronically every day and not enjoy it. Like, I don't run and I'm perfectly fit and I have good heart rate, resting heart rate and all that stuff. Your body weight and your body fat, as well as your blood sugar and things like that, also come into play, as we know. And what I mean by that is just managing your body weight in this context, meaning a heavy person who has a lot of muscle will have decent health, but they'll have much better health at a lower body weight. Somebody who has a low body weight and is not that strong, doesn't have that much muscle, maybe doesn't watch their diet, will surprisingly have much better health markers than you might think. Now, there's exceptions to all of that, right? We know skinny people who have like huge, high lipids and LDL cholesterol. Some of that's genetic and that's a separate factor. But in general, if you're at a reasonable body weight, reasonable body fat, and you're active, of course, you get the best of all those worlds.
Well, it sounds like almost like the food pyramid, which we know for decades has been upside down, right? It sounds like you're turning the exercise pyramid upside down as well, where most people would think that cardio should be the foundation. You're saying strength training is the foundation and cardio goes on top. I find that very interesting.
Do you think that let me ask you this, just honestly, do you think when most people talk about cardio, and most people aren't even doing that much cardio probably, but
right,
do they really care about heart health? Let's be honest. Or are they really thinking about weight loss?
Well, I think people think that weight loss equals health and being skinny equals health. Yes. And I think that's the motivation. That's always been the motivation. From what I can see outside of our world, I think the focus is still on primarily being skinny and losing weight. Yeah.
Okay, good. So I would agree with that. I just wanted to kind of gauge your perspective from talking to your own clients and in the world you're in that I don't think most people are walking around thinking like, all right, I got good muscle mass. I have good cholesterol. I'm healthy. I just need to get my heart rate up. So I'm going to do more cardio, or I need to improve my cardiovascular health. So I'm going to do more cardio. Like most people are in that world are already fit in many other ways. They're not thinking I'm missing out on this. It's more people are thinking I'm going to lose weight, lose fat, burn fat. They think cardio burns fat. And the problem with that whole thing is the evidence doesn't support that to be true. It supports generally the opposite, that too much cardio, especially what we call chronic cardio or metronomic cardio, is stressful It's stressful. It causes you to be hungrier. It interferes with your sleep. It can cause recovery issues if it's the wrong kind of cardio. Like running tends to be the worst for the vast majority of people because most people don't know how to run. Let's be honest. They don't know how to run on the balls of their feet. And so it's just very stressful. And also your body will adapt to what it gets good at. So if you're running a lot, your body's going to get very efficient at running. It's going to start burning way fewer calories in response to every extra mile run. And we know this, it's called the constrained model of energy expenditure. Whereas strength training, what are you doing there? Well, you are adding muscle. You're using your nutrients and insulin and your glucose coming in to shuttle that into your muscles. It's called glycogen, right? The energy stores of your muscles. You're burning more calories just by carrying that extra expensive tissue on your body. You're able to produce more force, which requires less energy. Your body will burn a lot more calories trying to maintain your muscle. So it kind of has the opposite effect. And that's why it's very surprising, like you said, when people say, well, I don't have to do cardio, like I don't have to run. No, you could lift weights, walk 10,000 steps a day, and manage your diet, because that is part of it. In fact, when we talk about weight loss and getting skinny, and people are usually thinking they want to be leaner.
Right.
But what ends up happening is they get skinny fat, they get frumpy. As you age, your hormones drop, testosterone, all of that. You just gain more and more body fat, less and less muscle, same weight on the scale, frumpier, fatter body composition. Right. And that's not what we're going for.
I guess there's an old saying that says you can't outwork a bad diet.
And there's that. There's that.
Right.
100%.
So you have to start with nutrition. So now remember, we're talking about people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. You could apply all these same rules to those people. If you're going 100%. To the gym, focus on the strength training.
That's the beauty of it. The principles apply to 20-year-olds and 90-year-olds, men and women, just to different degrees and different responses, personal responses to it. Not everybody's going to eat the same amount of calories or train the same amount of volume or frequency, and et cetera.
Are people accepting this new reality, especially in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, or do you feel like there's still some hesitancy to accept this fact that I don't need to spend 40 minutes on the treadmill? I really should be lifting weights. I should work on my strength training.
I suppose the answer is yes to both. In other words, I just went to the villages where my parents live. We visited them, and there's a lot of people out there, on their golf carts, playing golf, walking around. They're kind of active. They're kind of healthy, but a lot of them don't lift weights. So, I see the hunched over postures. I see the weakness. I see all that. And I wonder if I had a conversation with them and they listen, I don't know, I'm the young guy, I'm the young whippersnapper, I don't know. What do I know? But I wonder, but I do know that podcast listenership and the amount of people asking these questions, the amount of people that I have as clients who are in that age group has grown tremendously over the years. And just like the mythology around women and bulking and all this, and even lifting weights in general, it's becoming more accepted. And I think our generation and the next generation are going to just make it that much more so. You're not going to know until you try, though. So if you're listening and you're skeptical of this guy, talk to me. Let's have you do something very achievable and simple for about a month. And you tell me you don't feel I'll say a badass, pardon the French, in a few weeks just of being more active and lifting weights.
Well, I can see it in my clientele. The beauty of what I do, I've been doing this for over 30 years, is I've seen people go from 60 to 70 to 80 to 90 and beyond. I've seen dozens, hundreds maybe, of retirements, full-length retirements, 60, 70, 80, 90, and beyond. And I've seen some people thrive in retirement and others falter and maybe struggle a little bit. And I've seen those who work out and lift weights and take good care of themselves and how active and how much enjoyment they get out of retirement versus those who maybe haven't, and their retirement's been a little bit different. So I'm with you. I think strength training is really important. I try to express that to my clients. But being a financial planner, I'm not sure how much weight that carries.
They'll give their doctor more weight, and yet you probably know more than most doctors about this stuff. Just to put it out there, not to disparage all doctors, but there is a difference between the medical industry and the health and the healthy living and wellness industry. Yeah,
I always say find a doctor that lifts weights.
Yes, 100%.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that. This guy, Dr. Spencer Nadolsky, have you heard of him?
Yes.
He has a huge following, on Instagram. He calls himself a meme. He's a lipid and meme specialist, is what he calls himself. Lipid. Okay. And he was actually on my show, which I was surprised to get him on the show because he's a big guy, but really, really nice guy. Kind of snarky, but it's deservedly so, given who he's calling out, all the fear mongers out there,
right.
And all the charlatans and gurus and whatnot. But he just started a private practice, or he's been in practice for years, but he just started a cash-based practice because that's how you have to do it. You can't be associated with insurance to do it this way. That where, yes, you can take GLP-1 drugs, but you have to be coached by them for lifting and lifestyle to do it the right way so that eventually you could probably come off of it. And the way his model is like $150 a month with like 24/7 access directly to the doctor to just text questions to him, which again, the insurance industry won't even allow that. You have to have appointments. You have to have separate appointments sometimes. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. I went to a doctor one time, an eye doctor, and he said, well, for this other test, I can't just do it back to back because insurance needs them to be separate. And I'm like, oh my God, you guys, this is what's wrong with the industry.
Yeah, it is crazy.
So anyway, long story short, I think we're going that direction where more and more medical practitioners are themselves lifters and stuff, but that's a great tip.
Yeah, always, find a doctor who lifts weights. Otherwise, you're going to get bad advice.
Yeah, or just don't listen to them for that advice.
Right,
That's the other way to do it.
I just use the term non-negotiable a lot. I've noticed that in a couple of your podcasts. I think you mentioned it today as well. Do you have like a list of non-negotiables?
Sure. It probably evolves every day, whatever podcast I'm on. But I just did a podcast episode called the 3+3 model of optimal fat loss.
Okay.
And that had 3 non-negotiables in there, which were, and hopefully I get these right, because now I got to remember which 3 I included in there.
Put you on the spot.
But one was actually the first one was eating enough protein.
Okay.
I'm actually going to pull it up now. It's episode 326.
Do you have a rule of thumb for that? Because I think that's a gray area too that people don't really understand. What's the rule of thumb? Let's stick to retirees, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s. How much protein should they be eating?
Yeah, so we have a lot of evidence now that shows 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of your body weight. And that's a very simple rule of thumb. People will talk about, target weight and what about if I'm in fat loss, blah, blah, blah. Listen, if you're getting at least 0.7 grams per pound, you're in the top 2% of people getting enough protein.
So if you weigh 100 pounds, 70 to 100 grams of protein.
That's right. And if you weigh 200 pounds, that's 140 or more grams.
That's a lot of protein.
It seems like a lot relative to the current diet. Once you've shifted to that, then it's normal. And it's funny because in percentage of your calories, it's only 20-25%.
Okay.
Right? But most people are eating 10% of their diet as protein. So we see it as a lot, right?
That's that upside down food pyramid again, where the protein was at the top.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. And I anchor my nutrition with protein. I always start with the protein. If you could eat protein in every meal, that's a great place to start. And it's obviously it's beneficial for a lot of reasons people don't think. The big reason is building muscle, but it also helps preserve muscle mass. It's anti-catabolic. It prevents the breakdown of muscle mass, and it's highly satiating. It fills you up. I mean, just adding protein, you might not be as hungry and eat as much. It's also found in pretty much just whole foods for the most part. Really good protein bars have them as well.
I've heard.
And also it's got the highest, what's called thermic effect of food, right? It burns more calories to process through your digestive system than carbs and fat. Carbs is number 2, and then fats are number 3. So
that was your first non-negotiable. Eat enough protein. What was your second non-negotiable?
What do you think the second one is? We already talked about it quite a bit.
Strength training. Lifting weights.
Because I was looking at that episode because I have 3 non-negotiables and then I have 3 what I call optimizers. So yeah, lifting weights is the second one. The reason it's non-negotiable is people want to lose weight, right? Or they want to lose fat, but every time you lose weight, you lose muscle. I want to get that through people's heads. So every time you've dieted in your life, if you hadn't been lifting weights and let's say you lost 20 pounds, the average amount of muscle mass lost is about 25%. So out of that 20 pounds, 5 was muscle. Now, some of it's lean mass and water and this and that. And it's hard to tease it all out. But when you gain that 20 pounds back, which we all do, right? Like everybody gains it back.
It's not muscle.
And it's not muscle. So what are you doing? You're just exchanging 5 pounds of muscle for 5 pounds of fat every single time. And you're effectively accelerating that process because you're chronically yo-yo dieting. So conversely, if you just have that protein and lift weights, you're telling your body muscle is important to keep. And when you lose that 20 pounds, 19.5 of it is going to be muscle. It's going to be fat. I mean, it literally is that much of a game changer. And so now think about it. Every time you lose weight, you're losing fat. Every time you come back or gain weight, if you need to gain weight, some of that's going to be muscle, which is the other side of the equation, Tony, we didn't even talk about. A lot of people have never spent time in a muscle building phase. deliberately gaining weight for about, let's say 6 months is a good length of time. Not a lot of weight for a man. For the average male, it might be 15, 20 pounds, might be on the upper end. For a female, it might be 10, right? Of which at least half is going to be muscle. That's muscle that is hard to put on in any other way.
Right.
You know, it's fat. So anyway, that's the second non-negotiable to fat loss, because you need to hold on to the muscle when you lose weight. The third non-negotiable is recovery. And recovery is like a huge thing because it includes sleep. It includes managing your stress. It includes your hormonal health, like just anything that you need to take stress off your body. It's going to differ from one person to the next. Some people may have great sleep, but they've got, 3 kids and 2 jobs and, whatever that's causing them a ton of stress in their life, as we all do when we get older. This is one benefit of retirement I've seen for a lot of my clients in retirement is they don't have the work stress, necessarily. I mean, unless they're doing other things.
Right.
But then they have other stress, like financial stress, which you deal with. So we all have stress, and it's how you perceive it, how you manage it, how you balance all the things in your life, including your sleep. We can't be perfect, but it's a non-negotiable if you want to be healthy.
And again, for all ages, plenty of protein, lifting weights, build strength, and recovery. So for me, mobility, I think mobility falls in that recovery zone. So that's why I love mobility.
For sure.
It makes me feel better, makes me recover quicker.
Yep.
Takes the stress away.
Meditation can fall in there, like all that stuff. Yep.
So I've heard some studies recently in the last couple of weeks about the positive effects of creatine when it comes to brain strength, retaining memory, maybe staving off Alzheimer's. Have you read any of these reports about the positive effects of creatine?
I'm becoming a really big fan of high dose creatine for that reason. So
in terms of Alzheimer's?
In terms of cognitive health, Alzheimer's, there's some interesting effects when you're under stress that having creatine could be helpful. I'd have to go, like you said, you put me on the spot, so I don't have like the exact studies as to what the mechanisms were, but the typical creatine loading is 5 grams a day, right? We know that for 80% of people, they can respond by having a little bit better performance in the gym, a little bit better recovery. But for the cognitive effects, you need to take something like 15 or 20 grams. It's probably dose dependent based on your body weight. Doing that over the long term, it's not something that happens instantly, could potentially have some massive benefits like cognitive processing, acute effects under stress we talked about, enhancing memory. Yeah, it's amazing. And there's no downsides to creatine,
Yeah, I think it's probably still a little early on, but I've heard these studies like in the last few weeks or few months, which have been pretty exciting. I mean, I have a lot of clients who have ended up with Alzheimer's, ended up in nursing homes, burned through everything they saved that they were, wanted to pass on to their family. Nursing homes are very expensive, especially when you have Alzheimer's. And to hear this report that, there's a potential solution in creatine, that's something that I'm going to keep a close eye on.
Somebody was talking about, I think it was the guys on Mind Pump, even as long as like 3 years ago, were saying like one day everybody from babies to old people are going to be taking creatine just because it's all upside. I mean, it's been the most studied supplement of all time with 0 side effects other than people are allergic and then they just can't take it at all. Yeah, it's kind of crazy because speaking of lifting, right? Like there's different energy systems. We have our adenosine triphosphate creatine phosphate system that uses the ATP in our system, which is a very small amount of energy that gets depleted rapidly with like a high stress load, like a lifting session or like a sprint. And that's where creatine gives you the little boost, right? And then you have your other systems related to glycogen and whatnot. So the fact that it also has these other benefits that even if you're not lifting, maybe you should take it. I guess we're going to see it in everything one day.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Again, I think it's pretty early on, but I mean, for people who are concerned about cognitive health, you might want to look into some of these new reports.
Or vegetarians or vegans. Yeah,
right,
vegetarians and vegans too who don't get nearly enough creatine. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we emphasized strength training. We emphasized proper nutrition. We really got into this relationship, which I have always thought was there, but again, as I get older, it's becoming more clear to me, the relationship between health and wealth. I mean, having wealth is fantastic, but if you can't enjoy it, right, what's the point in having it? And I see clients who take care I have clients who I skied with this winter, both in their 70s. They asked me to go skiing with them one day. And I said, this will be fun. I love to ski. I figured it would be a nice, relaxing, slow trip down the mountain. These two guys in their 70s, I couldn't keep up with them on the mountain. And I thought that was just fantastic. I have clients who are in their 70s and play basketball. I have clients who play pickleball. And I just think it's amazing. I just tell my clients, just if you don't do anything else, just keep moving. But if you're looking for more information on how to take good care of yourself, on health and nutrition, especially as you age, check out the Wits and Weights podcast with Philip Pape. You also have a website, witsandweights.com.
That's right.
Which people can check out.
Yep, witsandweights.com. Plenty of free resources there as well. If you go to witsandweights.com/free.
Great. So do you want to leave us with just a couple of maybe actionable steps that people can maybe implement this week if they're listening to the podcast?
Yeah, you've got to start where you're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about what you're not doing and everything we talked about today. What is the most achievable step for you today? It might be finding a gym that has what you need, like the right commute and the right environment and vibe and cost and all that. Like literally just finding it. Like if you're not even working out or going to the gym, just finding a gym is a great step. I believe that an action leads to another action leads to another. And that's how we create momentum. That's like the foundation of habit building. So you can do that. On the nutrition side, two possibilities. Either start tracking your food somehow, game changer. I don't care what targets you're trying to hit. Doesn't matter. Don't worry about that. Just track it. Log it.
There are some great apps out there for people to track their nutrition. I know that you use one in particular. Which one do you like?
I like MacroFactor.
MacroFactor. Yeah. Okay.
And I like it because now it's a paid app, but you get what you pay for, as they say. I like MacroFactor because it's the only app so far that will estimate your true expenditure based on what you eat and how your body weight changes. And so where a lot of people use MyFitnessPal and other apps, they're logging their food, which is great, but then they're not sure how much to eat if they're trying to go after a goal. So MacroFactor just gives you the accurate numbers for where you are every given week. So I like that. But even if you don't want to track or weigh or any of that, eat protein in every meal. That would be the one thing. So either go find a gym and or start working out and or track your food or eat protein every meal. Those would be simple places to start.
Well, that's fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and for your insights on health and fitness. And I would say that wraps up another episode of A Smarter Way to Retire. Again, if you want more information about health, wellness, nutrition, check out the Wits and Weights podcast on Apple and Spotify. Anywhere else?
Every platform. It's everywhere.
Every platform?
It's everywhere.
And you can also check out Phil's website, witsandweights.com. And maybe we'll have you back for another episode about creatine and nutrition.
Yep. Anytime, man. Anytime.
A
pleasure.
Again, I appreciate your time. And thanks for listening. Everyone will see you next week.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Osaic Wealth, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Osaic Wealth is separately owned, and other entities and or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Osaic Wealth. The opinions expressed herein are for general information only and is not necessarily the opinions of Osaic Wealth or its representatives. Investing is subject to risk, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. It is not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Please consult your financial professional, attorney, or tax advisor with regard to your individual situation.